We have a quorum, so.
Okay.
And again, Trustee Westcott will not be here tonight. So with that, I will open the meeting, call the meeting to order at, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Call the meeting to order at 6:32 on March 2nd, 2021. Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America,
States of America,
and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation, under
under
God,
God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Okay, roll call, please. Let's see where we've got Mr. Ott in.
Mayor Mahoney.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Ott.
Here.
Trustee Antonopoulos.
Here.
Trustee Kimberly.
Here.
Trustee Jeffrey.
Here.
Thank you. Trustee Westcott, no. Trustee White.
Here.
Thank you.
All right. Approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
A second.
Motion is second. Roll call, please.
Trustee Ott.
Yes.
Trustee White.
Yes.
Trustee Antonopoulos.
Yes.
Mayor Mahoney.
Yes.
Trustee Jeffrey.
Yes.
Trustee Kimberly.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. And Ms. Blackstone, did we have any audience business?
We did not through the email, and then I know of the attendees. Jamie, oh, maybe she went away, was just here to listen, and then Bill, I believe, is with Mark Bush, and I'm not sure who the last one is, so I can ask to see if any of them have.
Charlie Foster, also with Mark Bush.
Oh, they're both with Mark Bush? Okay.
So,
And so we'll have them speak during that discussion, but other than that, I think we're good.
Okay. All right. Next item is the consent agenda. On that is the payment approval report in the amount of $534,969.52. Also, the February 16th, 2021 minutes. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion is second. Roll call, please.
Yes. Trustee Jeffrey.
Yes.
Trustee Antonopoulos.
Yes.
Trustee Kimberly.
Yes.
Trustee White. Trustee White? Okay, I see your lips moving. Thank you. Mayor Mahoney.
Yes.
Trustee Ott.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, and motion carries. All right, next item is the action item, waste management renewed and amended service agreement. Ms. Duran?
Thank you, Mayor. You have already approved in concept the new rates for waste management for the 2021 period. But because the agreement requires that we actually do an amendment to the agreement on an annual basis to approve a change to rates, we just are presenting this agreement to you tonight, but the rate numbers that you see are the same as the ones that you've approved previously.
Any questions or comments? Any of the trustees? Okay, not seeing any. So with that, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the third amendment to the renewed, amended, and restated. Did you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry.
First part of it.
All of a sudden it said I was muted halfway through. So I move to approve this amendment.
Second.
Okay.
Did you get that, Linda?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, all right. Motion and second. Roll call, please.
Trustee Ott.
No.
Trustee Kimberly.
Yes.
Trustee White.
Yes.
Trustee Antonopoulos.
Yes.
Trustee Jeffrey.
Yes.
Mayor Mahoney.
Yes, and
Thank you.
carries. Next item is the discussion item, gas and oil reverse setback proposals. Mr. Sura.
Yes, thank you. Glad to be here tonight. Good to see you all. I have a brief presentation about the proposal that is being put before you, and this is a discussion item. I'm looking forward to a lot of give and take here, and a lot of questions that you may have about this proposal and the need for it. If I may, I just would like to share my screen and start the proposal.
Yeah, it should be ready, Matt.
Yeah, looks like it.
Okay.
Okay, you should be able to see that now.
Yes, we can.
Great. So the current code has just recently been rewritten to deal with oil and gas issues. As you remember, we had a lengthy discussion and even looked at some of the different scientific studies about the human health impacts of having oil and gas development built close to homes. And Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment put forward a recommendation or put forward a report that stated that there were impacts to human health that were experienced as far as 2,000 feet away from homes downwind of oil and gas facilities. Now, the majority of those impacts, but not all, were during the drilling and hydraulic fracturing periods where the production is occurring on an oil and gas pad. So we put forward a recommendation of 1,000-foot setback, and that was passed by the town of Lochbuie. So now a new oil and gas facility moving into adjacent to a neighborhood can't be any closer than 1,000 feet from that neighborhood. What we're discussing today is the other side of that coin. What if there's an oil and gas facility, whether it be one well or 20 wells, that is there and a neighborhood is moving in next to it? Are there appropriate setbacks for the residential use coming in, moving in adjacent to an industrial use? And to even go farther, are there appropriate setbacks for residential use on a plugged oil and gas well? That is a well that has been capped, that has been cemented and is no longer there, has been buried. But is it appropriate to be building a house right on top of that? And so that's what we're going to be discussing today. The way that the current code deals with this issue is that it's done on a site-by-site analysis. First, there is a requirement that is pretty general requirement of almost all planning in every jurisdiction that you're going to have the new land use be compatible with the existing land use. And compatibility is addressed in a number of different ways, typically through buffering, but also can be landscaping. There can be a number of ways that compatibility is mitigated. But that's the purpose of zoning, is to make sure that land uses are compatible with one another. And then we have in section 19.4 180D, we have a landscaping and screening requirement that does address some buffering requirements. The reason that we're bringing this up today is that, frankly, this has become an issue throughout the Front Range. You know, as oil and gas development has accelerated, so has residential development, and there has been a clash there. And more often than not, now we're experiencing new residential development moving into old oil and gas fields. I experienced this for a landowner that I worked with in the town of Johnstown, and Johnstown didn't have any reverse setbacks, and they were platting homes right on top of plugged and abandoned wells. And that's dangerous, frankly. You know, the plugging and abandonment that we do today is as good as we think that we can do. The cement has to go well beyond what is thought to be necessary to make sure that it's never going to leak again. But the reality is that it's cement that's put in there, and there's a human condition, mistakes occur, and cement cracks. And over time, we have had to revisit some wells that have been plugged and abandoned and re-plug and abandon them. Now, the idea that one of those wells that might need to be re-plugged and abandoned is in someone's crawl space, should give any landowner and certainly any local government pause. And we're trying to address that today. So we're looking at putting this within the site design standards in section 19.4 and a new section 200. And what it would initially do, the first thing it would do is make sure that there remains 1,000-foot setback if all the wells have not been drilled. What we're seeing in some jurisdictions is that the oil and gas industry goes in, they only drill one well. All of a sudden there's a lot of homes that are built, and then you've got a dangerous situation where you have that active drilling occurring, the drilling, the hydraulic fracturing, all of that nuisance and those air quality concerns, noise concerns, traffic concerns, light concerns, etc., happening at the same time that people are living there. And so that's what A does, is ensure that all the wells need to be developed, and there's still a 1,000-foot buffer. After all the wells are developed, we go into the second in B, and this is the setback that is being proposed. For 1 to 2 wells, there would be a 200-foot setback. 3 to 10 wells, 350-foot setback. 11 to 24, 425 or more, 500. And the reason that we're looking at these graduated setbacks is because certainly the one oil and gas well on the prairie with the lonely pump jack, is not the potential impact that 24 wells would be. It's a different nature in industrial activity. There's more traffic going to a well pad that has 24 wells. And if they decide that they're going to redevelop those wells or recomplete those wells, even sometimes they have to re-drill them, or what they call reworking the well. That can be that same sort of industrial activity. It's in shorter period of time. It's not happening over months. It's happening over days or possibly a week, but it's still an industrial activity, and having folks live, as close as 150 feet or closer is probably inappropriate. For something, if there were going to be 24 wells, they would have, possibly weeks of that industrial activity if they were all being recompleted or refracked. So the latter part of this short effort, this short code revision, just states that the plat is going to need to state edge of any production sites, reception number, and recording location of all surface use agreements, and the location of any plugged and abandoned wells. And again, then stating that there's a expectation that there will be at least a 50-foot setback from any buildable structures or any habitable structures from those plugged and abandoned wells. And then that once they are plugged and abandoned, they will vacate easements. So how would this proposal affect Lac Boy? So here we have up here in the northern part of—
May I interrupt you?
Pardon?
May I interrupt?
Please.
Thank you. Sorry, I tried to raise my hand. I don't know if you could see it.
Oh, I'm not so good at seeing that. Thanks for interrupting me.
Thank you. It took me a few minutes to figure out how to raise my hand. So going back to the screen that we were just on with the setbacks, where did you guys come up with those numbers? Like the 200 feet, is that based on some scientific study, or where are we getting those figures from? Like I'm noticing from 1 to 2 wells going down to 25 wells. I mean, that's a football field. That's not a lot of room. Like my husband works in oil and gas, and something like 25 horizontal wells, a normal setback would be 1,000 feet. And why aren't we doing it the same both ways?
All good questions. And as I mentioned, you know, there are a few studies, a handful of studies that we've looked at the town of Lochbuie when we were deciding that we were going to have 1,000-foot setback of new oil and gas facilities to existing homes. My feeling is that you don't need that dramatic a setback when you're building new homes to an existing oil and gas facility. And that's for a number of reasons. The first is that the greatest impact, and I think that your husband would probably agree, the greatest impact of oil and gas development is during the time where they're actually doing the drilling and completion operations. You've got the noise, the dust, the odor, just the amount of activity that is occurring and the traffic that's related with that. You know, those are, you know, some of the biggest impacts you're going to experience, and you're not going to experience them, particularly for these multi-well pads. You're not going to experience them for just a day or so. It could be months. It could be over a year of drilling and hydraulic fracturing activity for some of these larger pads. And so that really is truly an industrial operation, and nobody would want to live near it. However, once you get into more of the production phase, you're still having some industrial activity, and you're going to have some workover rigs. There may be some re-completions, but for the most part, they've quieted down considerably. You're going to have an occasional tanker truck show up to move just some transport, some gas or some oil, that is. You may have to be doing some monitoring, and so there's a little bit of traffic that way. There are some engines that are running, some compressor engines at times. So there's a industrial nature to it, but it's just not that heavy industrial nature that is so off-putting and would frankly creates a nuisance to folks that are less than 1,000 feet away. There's also the expectation. If you are living in your residence and there's an open field next to you, and that's what you've known is that open field, and all of a sudden it becomes an oil and gas facility, that is not something that you were expecting. On the other hand, if there is an oil and gas facility there and you decide that you want to buy a home that's near that facility, or you're going to build a home near that facility, that's something that you're doing knowingly. And you know, you've had the option of maybe looking at another home, but you've made that decision that you're okay with living close to that industrial facility, and you know, that's okay. People are going to have to live next to these because they're, you know, 50,000 active wells in the state of Colorado, and you know, a lot of us wanting to live on the Front Range. So did that answer your question as to why there's a difference? The other question about whether it's 200 to 500, this is based on my experience and dealing with both, you know, representing homeowners, representing local governments, and dealing with complaints, frankly. And you know, we've found that over time that having a buffer between the source of the potential nuisance and a resident is going to make it much easier for both parties, both the industry and the resident. Are there any other questions before I move on?
No, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So again, we were talking about, you know, what this looks like. This is the SAM pad. This is the Lochbuie land pad. And there are other developments in the area that are going to be impacting future development. And there's new oil and gas development that's going to be impacting future residents, current and future residents. so this is an example of some new oil and gas facilities that don't have a lot of homes built immediately adjacent to them currently. This is an example of the sand pad. This is the production facility. This is production pad. This is 350 feet. What you would see is you would have a 350-foot buffer where that would be open space around that pad. If I could just take a second and just show you a little bit of kind of what that experience might look like. This is the sand pad.
And so just to be clear, Matt, this is not currently producing. This is one that's been capped and abandoned, or?
No, this is was just drilled like 2 or 3 years ago. It is currently producing.
That's what I thought.
All of these tanks are, they have this many tanks because there's that much oil coming out of the ground. It appears to be very productive. There's a similar looking pad that just finished up recently, I believe, called the Lac Buoy land pad that, looks very similar to this and has that same sort of those engines running all the time, that is both compressing the gas, moving that oil, moving that gas. These are well-run pads. They're clean pads, and they're less producing than any old pads, but they're still industrial in nature. There are emission control flares that are burning some of those emissions that coming from these tanks, and there are still tanker trucks that are coming probably every day, maybe multiple times a day for a well pad this big. I'm going to stop sharing there and just see if there are any other questions.
I just had a quick question. Are there any currently platted developments, like for example in Bella Vista or Silver Peaks, where there's additional growth expected that would be impacted by these new restrictions?
Well, so a couple ways to answer that. One, these are new. This is going to be new code language, but the restriction has always been there. The town of Lac Buoy, to my knowledge, has never allowed for homes to be built on top of oil and gas wells, as an example. There has always been some expectation, and in the code currently states that there has to be both compatibility and a buffer between uses that aren't compatible with one another. And it's just, this is going to be defining what size that buffer is. And then, you get to decide, what is appropriate. You could decide that you don't want to have this in your regulations, and you'd rather deal with it on a site-by-site basis. And that's a way of addressing it. My concern, is that, we don't want to see future town trustees that are, or future staff when, Steve is gone, whatever, that are allowing for, say, oil and gas development or new homes to be built right on top of plugged and abandoned wells, or to be not cognizant of some of the impacts, because you could be creating a headache for yourself, and for your residents, frankly, by allowing a lot of residential development near something that is going to be a nuisance.
Thank you.
Sure.
I would like to say on that
Trustee
note,
Jeffrey, Trustee White, and please, show your hands, please, so we can kind of keep a little semblance of order. Trustee Jeffrey, please.
I was just curious. We have a lot of developers in our town that we work regularly with, and I wondered what conversations have been had with them, and how that has all gone and how maybe they've sort of been included, because I hope that we as a town want to continue to have good relationships with those folks too.
Absolutely agree. So, you know, one of the reasons that we're doing this as a public study session is to make sure that folks have an opportunity to talk about it. This is not being, you know, put on an agenda. It's not, you know, currently slated for a decision. This is a discussion. And I have met with some of the developers in the area, and I think some of them are going to be representing themselves today. So I don't want to, you know, try to characterize, you know, those conversations, because they're going to be able to speak for themselves.
And I will tell you, Trustee Jeffrey, that we did provide drafts to the developer in Blue Lake and to the developer in Silver Peaks, sort of our two largest, most active developments right now. And have had conversations with the Blue Lakes developers team anyway.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it.
All right. Trustee White? No? Okay. Anyone else have any questions or comments? I just did have one thing to say, Mr. Sura. You know, you made comment about, you know, we want to make sure that, you know, future boards or future employees don't allow these things to happen. But I just want to, you know, make sure the board understands, everybody understands, and most of us do, that at any time any board can come and make changes to code and things of that nature. So it's, even though we set it in place, it can still be changed down the road by another board. But it is incumbent upon us as our job to look at these things and make decisions based on, you know, looking out for the people who have elected us, as well as the interests of the developers who are here building. So we have to, it's quite a balance. But anyway, anyone else have anything they need to say, any of the trustees? All right, I believe someone from Bella Vista is here as well, or from Blue Lakes. Anybody know?
I'm not sure, but I mean, I just switched Bill. He had his hand up, and whether you're letting him speak right now or not, I'm not sure. I can change all the rest of them to panelists and we can ask those questions, but however you want to handle that.
Please.
Okay.
Bring them forward, and I'm sorry, I don't want to butcher your last name.
It's Kyriagis.
Kyriagis. Okay, thank you.
So I'll just say for the record, my name's Bill Kyriagis. I'm an attorney with Otten Johnson, Robinson, Neff, and Raganetti in Denver. I represent the developer of the Blue Lake subdivision. The entity name is Loch Buoy Land 1. Want to thank you all for giving us an opportunity to chime in and weigh in on this tonight in this sort of a little bit more informal context than an official public hearing. So my client's project, I imagine you are all familiar with, the Blue Lakes project. It's a significant mixed-use development. It's had an approved PUD and annexation agreement with vested rights going back to 2004. My client doesn't object to the effort in general here, but we have some real concerns about the process and the outreach to the development community. Trustee Jeffrey hit on that. This seems to be moving pretty quickly, and my client's sense, at least, is that there hasn't really been meaningful outreach to the stakeholders in the development community. I do appreciate Ms. Duran and Mr. Sura's willingness to talk to me today about this, but I don't think that my client would feel that they've really been involved in this process and that there's been a sort of dialogue to include the stakeholders who are on the development side of this. And we're also very concerned specifically about the suggestion that this might be applied to existing projects that already have significant development approvals. And in my client's case, we've got vested rights, which are really intended to allow a developer who's making significant investments to have reliance that the development climate and the regulatory climate for the project that they're spending millions of dollars on is going to be predictable and stable. And so we really don't believe that this kind of setback at least should be applied to any kind of existing project with existing vested rights, sort of those projects that are already in the pipeline. You know, planning, contracts, financing, all of these kinds of decisions are made with an eye to what the regulations are when these kinds of projects get going. And my clients relied on that climate with the expectation that there aren't reverse setbacks under the existing code. There weren't at the time that they got all of their approvals and had moved as far along as they have. The setbacks for new wells, such as they were prior to this, as opposed to reverse setbacks, were significantly less than what's being proposed here. And so in contrast to a new project where a developer can plan for this kind of requirement as part of their pro forma, their analysis, their feasibility, it's a lot harder to do that in the middle of a project that's already as far underway as my client's project is. The other point I want to make, which Mr. Sura certainly highlighted, is that a reverse setback is different than a setback for new wells. A setback for new wells protects home buyers and residents from the surprise that, you know, the farm field behind them turns into an industrial site. And that's important, and the town has done that with their 1,000-foot setback, which Mr. Sura referenced. But this reverse setback really only applies where that activity, the oil and gas activity, is already in place. And the home buyers know in that context that they're getting something different. They're getting property that has the nearby oil and gas activity. And those kinds of things, frankly, they get priced into the lot. You pay more for the property with open space in the backyard. You might pay less for the property right next to a busy road. You might pay less for a property that's next to an oil and gas facility. And there's a whole spectrum of people out there looking for different things and looking for different price points and different options. And frankly, this kind of situation is one, at least where there isn't any surprise. Really, the only surprise here is to a client like my own who is having the rules potentially changed on them. And so what the town is discussing here is certainly understandable, but we're really concerned about the fairness and the surprise that would apply to the extent that there is this, you know, suggestion that this kind of ordinance would be applicable to projects that are already as far underway and that have vested rights. And so our goal really would be we'd like to avoid any kind of conflict on this and request that at a minimum the town and the board would consider some kind of exemption for pending projects like the Blue Lakes project with vested rights as it has. And again, I appreciate it.
Go ahead.
I just want to thank you again for the time and the opportunity tonight.
All right. Any questions or comments, board members? No? Oh, go ahead, Trustee Antonopoulos.
This is, I guess, maybe a question for both Mr. Sura and I'm sorry, I can't say. I know you said it.
It's Kyriakis. It's Greek, like
Kyriakis. I know. I can't talk. But basically, this is kind of what I was wondering. Is so, there apparently are specific issues with planned developments already in Blue Lake that this rule may affect. Is that what I'm hearing, or would those be considered on a case-by-case basis, as Mr. Sura referenced earlier?
So our concern is that this could be construed to apply to the Blue Lakes project, and we believe that it would be an increased burden compared to what we were expecting. And so from our perspective, it would be sort of a change in the rules. We can get into fighting about whether or not the vested rights that we have under the annexation agreement we have with the town would preclude application of this or not. But I think what we would like to see is some confirmation that that existing projects are exempted. You know, if the next project that comes down the road 2, 3, 5 years from now, if the town passes this kind of an ordinance, the developer can price that in, and they can decide, they can plan where their open space goes, and they can plan their setbacks, and they can plan, you know, they can plan into all the finance what these rules are. my clients have been planning to do single family development in these areas going back to 2004. And now all of a sudden, we're potentially faced with new rules that are, substantially increase the setbacks.
All right. Trustee White?
Yes, I'm just curious, as of right now with the developers that we have on the line here, is everyone currently following the 2021 COGCC guidelines, the minimum guidelines? Or are you guys like grandfathered into a prior year?
I don't know how to answer that. There are representatives from my client who are also here who I don't, if that's directed to us.
Trustee White, I think that prior to you being elected to the board last year, Matt, help me with the timing on that. The town adopted its own set of regulations regarding oil and gas setbacks that address issues of where oil and gas facilities can be placed in relation to existing residential and commercial property. So it's kind of the opposite setback scenario from what we're discussing here. But we have those in place, and those setbacks are within the parameters of what's allowed to us under the Colorado Oil and Gas Commission regulations. And so far, everybody is in compliance or shall continue to be in compliance as we move forward.
Okay, I was curious on that, just touching into what he was saying earlier about, I personally do think too, if it's something that they've already invested in, it is hard to just change the rules. Is it possible to grandfather those projects in, that if this is something we move forward with, they wouldn't take place for anybody after, that date moving forward, and everyone behind would be grandfathered in? That's what I would think.
I think that's a legitimate question and something that we need to think about and consider and possibly discuss with some legal advice, maybe in executive session at some point here.
And this is Russ Watterson. I'm a representative of the developer for Bella Vista. And if I could just answer your question, Board Member White, this is the first time that we would, in this particular project, have any planning that needs to be done around an oil and gas well. In prior phases of this project, we have not had to deal with this issue. And so, as Bill said, we have, been working on this project for 17, 18 years with certain expectations about lot counts and the number of units that will ultimately be in this project. And if this regulation is passed as being proposed by Mr. Sura, this project will lose over 100 lots. And so that is a very, very significant impact to the development, to the developer, its expectations, and for the town. These are people who would not be moving in. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
In terms of the expectations, these reverse setbacks do occur in other towns. The minimum reverse setback that you can find is 150 feet. The maximum is 1,000 feet. And Weld County, which is has probably the most oil and gas wells of any county in the state of Colorado, and certainly is friendly to both oil and gas and development interests, has a 350-foot setback. So what we're proposing is right in line with our neighbors and frankly the surrounding county. The idea that a municipality would have a less stringent setback than the surrounding county, it's up to you. You can do whatever you want. It's just that, I think that to be in line with adjacent jurisdictions makes a lot of sense in this case.
And we're not questioning necessarily the numbers. It's really about applicability to an existing project and the reliance and the fairness about that.
Trustee White?
Hi. I just wanted to say that I know that I would consider neighbors with Erie as well. And I know that they do have a lot of homes that are built on top of closed and capped, the old wells that have been closed down. So, and half of that is Weld County.
Anyone else, any comments, questions? No? All right, well, yeah, this is definitely something that we're gonna have to continue having discussions on, because I'm torn between both, because I fully understand the developer side coming in with expectations, knowing this is what we're going to produce, this is what we're going to do. But on the other side, it's also the developers who, allowed the oil and gas to come in there at a later date, and that's their thing. And we are also, as elected officials, our job is to look out for the residents. And again, I know we can go back to when you guys build the homes, people will come in and buy them with that understanding, kind of I don't much care for the term, but buyer beware kind of thing. They buy a house close to a well, it's an understanding. It's a tough spot. It really is. And I really do want to protect citizens, make sure that, we have those safeguards in place. But by the same token, I wonder if there isn't some compromise we could make with developers within this that's beneficial for both. So any other statements, comments, questions from trustees? I'm not seeing any. I hate this online stuff. I got to play DJ while I'm chairing a meeting. It's Trustee Kimberly.
Figured that'd be easier than looking for my virtual hand. This is an open question to whoever can answer it. There was a statement made a little bit ago that with an existing approved development, that would impact 100 different sites. If those sites were to be developed, how close would they be to within the the parameters that Mr. Sir had talked about? So how close are we talking? Because I was just curious because of the potential safety if the whole plan is built out. How close are we getting?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, and the reps for the developer can speak on this, but I believe their setback is 150 feet currently. Okay. Is that what you're working with?
Yeah, that's been our expectation.
Okay.
And I may be I'm prepared to be wrong on this, but I think there was a well in 2017 that was approved in Lochbuie at 150-foot setback, and there are other local jurisdictions within Weld County where the municipality enforces a 150-foot setback.
Mr. Mayor,
yes.
This is Charlie Foster, and I just wondered if I could make one comment.
Okay, Mr.
I'm
Foster.
answering your question, or pardon me, I'm answering the board member's question. And one of the things I've noticed is the definition of where the setback would be measured from. And I believe in the proposal, it's from the pad site. And just as an example, the wells for the Lochbuie land property are set back over 350 feet to the west of the eastern edge of that pad site. So it makes a big difference where you start your measurements. Are you measuring from the tanks? Are you worried about the wells? If you're worried about the wells, these wells are going to be 400 feet from a landscape area that is being proposed by Crestone. So I would like for that to be clarified as part of your ordinance. Thank you.
Yeah, that's something I'd actually like to see an outline of. So, I mean, we got to make a decision. We're going to be making decisions on this, and I'd like to have all the information. That's something that I think would help all of us make a decision. Where does that start? Is there a center point? We're going 50 feet off of it. Where's the start point and where's the end? It's really
an excellent point. And I think to gather all that data, it makes sense for us to find, what those landscaping plans look like. We're dealing with the developer here, who also is, signed the surface use agreement with Crestone Peak Resources, and so they have the ability to give us that information as to what that landscaping is going to look like, what kind of buffer that is going to provide, frankly, and if the current structure of the pad is that there is a lot of working pad surface that could be brought down, and that would change where the homes were able to be built. Right now, if they're talking about 150-foot setback from a wellhead, that's going to put homes on the well pad, because the well pad is so large. So 150 feet next to that well, if that's where they're measuring the setback, that would put a home on the well site itself. And I don't think that they mean to do that. I don't think that that's what's being proposed, but we need to figure out, and talk apples and oranges and see what that landscaping plan looks like and how it would affect the property.
I think one of the other issues that the board's going to have to figure out as we continue to discuss this proposed ordinance is we have developers explaining to you this evening that they have approved development plans and that they relied on them. But the reality is that the filing in Blue Lake, where these existing oil and gas facilities are, is not platted yet. So we all then need to come to an understanding of what it is that's an approved land use plan that they're asking for us to even grandfather in. So if a developer were to come forward with a new plat, for instance, they've always got open space dedication requirements, that kind of thing. And it could be that they might need to reconfigure that plat so that the land that surrounds closer to these oil and gas facilities is used for purposes other than residential. So this isn't as cut and dry as we're just taking away 100 lots, because frankly, this isn't even, if we're talking particularly about the Blue Lake situation, platted at this point. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that.
Yeah, so that is something that I had thought about earlier too, was as far as, once again, their open space requirements, parks, things like that, as being part of that setback, putting that into, instead of building homes next to it, put in the open space around that as more of a buffer. But
if I could make a comment,
go ahead,
Mayor, just, I think this discussion that we're having about how to measure a setback, is it measured from the wellhead? Is it measured from the pad site, the edge of the pad site, et cetera, et cetera? It illustrates why it would make a whole lot of sense for existing developments, for there to be an individualized discussion as it relates to an existing project, as opposed to imposing generally applicable rules, which might have very significant impacts on the development. And to address what Maureen said earlier about the plat, she's quite correct. We don't have an approved plat or for the area surrounding this oil and gas well site, but we do have PUDs that talk about certain densities and those sorts of things that are impacted by a late in the game change in the regulatory regime. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else have
Mayor, could I make a comment
Go
either
ahead.
to Mr. Watterson or to Charlie Foster, being familiar with this project? Is in looking at the approved PUD that was done for this, I don't see on that PUD map any location for oil and gas facilities. I don't see oil and gas facilities discussed in your original PUD.
And that's correct. But my point about densities being impacted by, which are addressed in the PUD and other vested rights. That those are very significant considerations.
But it seems like the
Talking about
developer
setbacks.
took actions that may have affected that.
Yeah, based upon assumptions we made about what the setbacks would be.
And in fact, Altamira has platted homes that are now, right in the middle of oil and gas facility. And they recognized that they were going to lose those lots because they wanted to pursue oil and gas development. And Lac Bowie Land has decided similarly. Those were decisions that were made at the time. And I don't know, what information they were basing that there was going to be a 150-foot setback from, such a large multi-well facility. It just, I don't know where that came from.
All right.
Well, there wasn't a specific reverse setback. I think the 150 is what the prior setback for new wells was, which may or may not have been sufficient for a new well. But the expectation here was based on the fact that there were not specific reverse setbacks, and a lot of the planning and a lot of the investment that went in was based on projections about density and what kind of uses and configurations would be workable in a context where those kinds of cut and dry setback requirements didn't apply.
And as Mr. Stamey brought to light, by the developer bringing in the oil wells, he impacted his ability to develop that land as well. And I understand if we made this change, it would impact it further. But again, it's our job to do what's in citizens' best, as well as looking out for you guys. We're going to make sure that we want you guys to build, and we want these homes to go in. But this is one of those things where we're just going to have to. That's why we're having this discussion right now. Does anyone else have anything else they want to add to this? And I'm not seeing anyone real excited about saying anything. So, Maureen, we can push this and continue it.
Yeah. So this, if I am correct, Linda, we published notice of public hearing for the first meeting in April. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. So we have the March 16th meeting to continue discussions if the board so is inclined to do that. I will get with Mr. Sura, and if Lac Bowie Lands representatives want to get in touch with us, we've all got a little bit of time, but we can always open up that hearing date and continue it on if we needed to do that, to get to the resolution that's the best resolution for the town. So.
And what was that date again?
April 6th, I think, is that first.
April 6th.
That's
okay.
the date we've published notice of the public hearing and decision. So. Yeah.
No, I'd definitely like to further this conversation. Stew on it a little bit, take all the information in, and and go from there. Anyone have anything else? No? All right. And with that, we'll go ahead and close up this discussion. Mr. Sura, Mr. Kyriagis, thank you. Mr. Waterfield, thank you for your time. And again, we're still open on this. We're still researching it. By all means, if there's anything, any information you can get to us, please feel free. I mean, that's what we're here for. We need to take in everything we can take in to figure this out and come to a conclusion. And so, all right, with that, we're going to move on to the Metro District discussion. Who's leading this, taking the ball on this one?
Well, I will introduce for the board Matt Ruland, who, there he is. Okay, nice to see you, Matt. Thanks for coming and doing this. He represents the Blue Lakes Metro District. I'm not sure which number Metro District that is, maybe all of them, I'm not sure. But he has graciously offered to give some of his time to just really give the board a 101 on special districts and why they're prevalent in Colorado, why developers use them, what it means for property owners. And this board has asked us for training on this particularly. And I am sorry that Ms. Westcott's not here this evening because I know this is of particular interest to her, but I appreciate you, Matt, coming and sharing your knowledge. He's been doing special district law for a long, long time and well known in that field of the law. So thank you so much for coming to share your expertise.
Yeah, I love metro districts.
Well, then
Especially
we're
that
gonna
one
have a
up
great
there.
time then, Mayor. Can you guys see my screen with the presentation?
Could you make it larger?
Make
Yeah.
it larger.
Turn it.
Let's
You had it a second ago.
Is that better?
There you go.
Okay. So if it's large on my screen, it's large on yours. I'm that's like you guys. I'm still learning how to Zoom and do this. I appreciate you guys putting up with me. So I have some notes that I put up. Can you see my notes as well, or just a presentation?
Just the presentation.
That'll make it easier for me, so I don't have too many things overlapping each other. Perfect. Well, good evening, Mayor and trustees. As Maureen said, I'm Matt Rulin with the firm of Collins, Cockrell & Cole. Our firm represents over 200 districts throughout the state, including metropolitan districts, fire, park, water districts, all sorts of local governments. In fact, we represent a few districts, like Maureen said, within Lochbuie, including Silver Peaks East Metropolitan District, and then the Blue Lakes districts numbers 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6. I'd like to thank you for taking a few moments to allow me to provide a very brief overview on districts tonight. My goal is to spend about 15 minutes doing like a 30,000 foot overview of districts, and then we can have a Q&A session and discussion amongst each other to determine if you guys have questions that I can address directly. So first, let's start with districts generally. As I'm sure you can appreciate, Front Range has a significant shortage in new housing. This has resulted in housing prices going up exceedingly, and it challenges affordability of homes. So what we're looking for is a way to increase new homes throughout the Front Range to address this low inventory market. Municipalities and counties across the state are requiring significant public infrastructure for new communities. And this can include need for water, need for highly amenitized communities. And oftentimes cities, counties, towns, such as yourself, are not willing or able to tax their entire tax base to fund all of this infrastructure. So this is where districts come in. They can assist with the financing of the construction. They can assist with operations of public infrastructure for new development. The phrase that's often used is that metropolitan district's role is to allow growth to pay its own way. That way, the entire town of Lochbuie is not paying for the roads within Blue Lakes, per se. It is the residents within Lochbuie will be paying for those roads. Metropolitan district's ability to fund public improvements is vital to the success of most developments throughout the state. In fact, metropolitan districts are a tool in the top 20 selling residential communities along the Front Range. So they're very prevalent throughout the state. They are a needed financing tool for most developments. Not only are districts used for financing public infrastructure, they're also oftentimes used to provide ongoing operations and maintenance of public infrastructure. In addition, metropolitan districts may provide covenant enforcement, though I'll tell you, oftentimes most developments, I wouldn't say most, a large chunk of developments keep that task with HOAs, as it seems to be better handled there, as people expect covenant enforcement to be done with an HOA. But districts under statute are authorized to do so. Metropolitan districts, so they're governed in a number of ways, including the first and most prevalent is the Special District Act, which is Title 32 of the Colorado Revised Statutes. That title is dedicated solely to special districts. Special districts, metropolitan districts, are also governed by their service plan, which in Lochbuie, they must be approved by you guys, the Town Board of Trustees. So we would come to you and seek approval of our service plan, which would allow us to go and organize a new district or come seek approval of a service plan amendment to make any changes to our previously approved service plan. In addition, there are many other statutory and constitutional checks and balances, including the budget and audit laws open meeting laws, such as you guys have to follow, Open Records Act, once again, that you guys must follow, as well as local government election codes. This is a lot of words on this page, so I'm not going to go through all of it, but in essence, what it's saying is metropolitan districts must provide at least 2 of these items. They include things like fire, park and rec, safety protections, street, water, sanitation, things you expect from a local government. And to be a metropolitan district, once again, you must provide at least 2 of these, though most districts provide more. Metropolitan districts, they're just like any other local government, including the town, in that it must walk and talk like a local government. What does this mean? Well, it means that districts are publicly accountable. A few ways that they're accountable is that they must hold open meetings, just like you guys have here. We have noticed the public of the meeting. Must maintain minutes of all meetings, hold regular elections, and for districts, that means May of every other year. There'll be regular elections of the district where board members are up for election. And we'll go into that a little bit more in depth later on in this presentation. Districts must also adopt annual budgets and file that with those with various agencies. And they must submit to annual financial audits unless somehow there's exceptions for revenues when they're very low. Revenues and expenses are low enough, then you can qualify for an audit exemption. Under state statute, metropolitan districts have the power of eminent domain, and they can condemn property for public purposes. And this can be limited, as can a number of other things, can be limited under the Metropolitan District Service Plan. And in a couple slides, I'll tell you how Loch Bowie's been handling it in recent cases. Metropolitan districts and their directors are granted governmental immunity, similar to how you guys have that same protection, as long as you are acting with the scope of your duties. And very importantly, metropolitan districts are granted the power to levy taxes and assess fees, as that's a way to finance the infrastructure and operational obligations of the district. In addition to statutory limitations, it's common for cities, towns, counties to provide additional limitations on metropolitan districts via their service plans. One area of significant limitation is that service plans almost universally now provide for a cap on the authorized debt service mill levy that a metropolitan district can impose. And this is a result of some financial difficulties metropolitan districts, or a few metropolitan districts, I should say, experienced in the late 80s and early 90s, where they did not have a debt mill levy cap. And when their development stalled or underperformed, the homes that were finished had some exorbitant mill levy rates in order to cover the debt payments that were expected. And so a few districts filed for bankruptcy, and as a result, statutes changed, and as a result, local jurisdictions changed how they approve service plans. Now, there's a debt mill levy that protects property owners and residents from an unforeseen property tax increase, if the development stalls or underperforms. I'll go into some details of how, once again, how Loch Bowie is handling it in another slide or so, or probably later in this slide. But as you can see now is, in today's day and age, if the circumstances were to arise where development stalls or underperforms, the Metropolitan District would simply be required to impose its maximum debt mill levy. Nothing more. There's nothing that the town or any other property owners would have any additional liability on. It is the bondholder who now has that risk. Gets shifted over to them. They make an investment in the development, and if development does not meet the expectations, they will have to live with what the maximum mill levy can provide them. Recent service plans in Loch Bowie provide a debt service mill levy cap of 50 mils Gallagherized, and we can get into the weeds of what Gallagherization means if you want later, but at this point I'll just leave it at that, and we can address it if there's a need to discuss later. In addition to mill levy caps, service plans generally address a number of other items, including some of these following that we have listed here. Authorizing a maximum debt issuance amount, restrictions on any use of fees. Just so you guys know, recent Loch Bowie service plans have approvals that say that district fees, districts cannot pledge any district fees for the repayment of debt unless they get specific town board authorization in advance. They can also not impose any district fees for administrative or operation expenses unless those fees are once again approved by the town board in advance and in writing. Service plans also provide a description of the initial boundaries and any possible future inclusions, which are similar to an annexation into a town. And Loch Bowie service plans provide that districts shall not include any property that's outside of the defined service area that the service plan allows for, unless we come to the town board and get prior consent. Service plans also often acknowledge or restrict a metropolitan district's use of the power of eminent domain. So while statute authorizes districts to have it, the service plans can restrict it. In Lochbuie, recent service plans are restricting it, and they limit the power of eminent domain by stating that districts shall not exercise the statutory power of eminent domain without the prior written consent of the town. So once again, you've reined in these districts and made them come to the town if they want to perform some of these extra tasks. Lochbuie also requires an annual report. And on that annual report, districts must list a number of significant events, such as they must provide their audit, their budgets, summary of development, fees, contact information, and the time of the regular meetings are expected to be for the following year. So now real quickly, I just want to touch on control of metropolitan districts, as it often seems to be confusing as to how they get turned over. People think of them oftentimes as HOA boards. However, in an HOA board, oftentimes developers can control them very far into the development, up to I believe it's 75% of development. And under metropolitan district, they're almost always controlled by developers at the beginning, because developers are the only property owner at the time of organization and early stages of the development. But there's a natural evolution to the transition, so long as homeowners want to be on the board. And the way it works is metropolitan districts are typically controlled by a 5-person board, and an eligible elector you must be an eligible elector to be on the board. And so the question is, what's an eligible elector? And what it essentially means is you must be registered to vote in Colorado, and then either be a resident of the district or own or be the spouse or civil union partner of someone who owns real or personal taxable property within the district. And in addition, anyone who's obligated to pay taxes under a contract on property within the district is also an eligible elector. So once again, typically, only the only eligible electors at the time of organization and through early stage of the development are representatives of the developer. However, once there's an individual property owner or resident in the community, whether they own property or just a resident, those individuals are eligible electors as well, and they can run at any regular election to serve on the board. And once again, these elections occur May of every other year. So the transition generally occurs from developer to resident control of a metropolitan district board as the project matures and residents become aware of the district and become interested. However, I can tell you there are a number of districts that are mature and homeowners are not interested, and the developers are sometimes kicking down doors to homeowners saying, hey, you want to take over? We're no longer involved. So there are some districts where homeowners want to get on right away, and others where they are not all that interested. It's kind of a case-by-case specific. However, the developer is unable to stop a homeowner or a resident from becoming on the board if residents so choose to take over the board at a regular election. So in order to finance public infrastructure, metropolitan districts typically issue debt, which is paid off from a pledge of revenues produced from the debt service mill levies that are imposed by the district. And here on the screen, I have an example of how a metropolitan district would appear on a tax statement. As you can see, it's just listed there, just like any other taxing entity, like a school district or the county or a fire district. So it provides, notice if you look at your tax bill, you will be able to see any entity that is imposing a tax on that property. So I'm not going to bore you with a math lesson here or go into too much detail, but I want to provide a quick breakdown of how taxpayers can determine their actual dollar amount of their taxes. And this would apply to metropolitan districts and any other taxing entities, such as any of the entities that were listed on that last list I showed. So first, you'll start with what the assessor determines to be the actual value of your home. You'll multiply that times the assessment ratio, which is currently 7.15% of the actual value. And then you'll multiply that times the mill levy rate. So let's use an example of the $400,000 home located in a metropolitan district imposing 50 mills. So you start with $400,000 and multiply that times 7.15, which is the current residential assessment rate. And you get an assessed value of that home of $28,600. Then you multiply that times 0.05, which is 50 mills. You end up with $1,430 for your annual tax burden on that $400,000 home. And once again, this formula would translate to any other taxing entity. You could plug in 2 mills in this, or 10 mills, or whatever you would need to figure it all out, how each entity is impacting you, or how they are as a total impacting your tax bill. So as an industry, we're trying to make it easier for people to know they're in districts. As a general counsel to a number of districts throughout the state, I don't like getting calls from anyone who says, I didn't know I was in a district, and I can't pay these taxes, or I wasn't expecting this. So ways we're trying to address this is to get more and more information out there as an industry, and ways that you as a property owner can find out if you're in a district is, you can look at a tax statement for the property you're going to purchase. That will show all taxing entities on it. Look at your title work. Districts are required per statute and oftentimes per service plan to record disclosures that will be on record. So when you get your title, it'll be listed there saying, here's a document reported against your property related to, for instance, Silver Peaks East Metropolitan District. And so you can do some due diligence on what that means. And then also, we have to provide various filings with Department of Local Affairs, and DOLA posts all those documents on their website for every district and local government around the state. So there's a clearinghouse for people to go to. And in addition, there's also some annual reports that must be filed and provided to property owners, either via mail or via posting on statewide website or the district website, to allow them to know when the next district's elections will be, what their mill levies will be, and various other information that would be helpful for them to know and understand as they navigate their way through these districts. So I don't know if I met my 15-minute goal, but this is the end of the presentation. I want to thank you for indulging me the last few minutes, and I'll take questions if you have any. And if for some reason you think of some in the middle of the night because this exciting stuff keeps you up, or next week you have some questions, you can reach out to me. Here's my contact information. I'm happy to chat and answer any questions you guys have. But thanks again.
Thank you. All right.
Matt,
Do you have any?
I think it might be helpful to explain why within the Blue Lakes development, there's so many different metropolitan districts so that they can get an understanding of that, right? So it's not within one recognized subdivision, which has multiple filings. I get that, but I just think a basic description of why we have, you said you represent what, 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, or whatever.
1, 2, 4, 5, 6. Yep. Yeah. And so,
and as long as we don't move them anymore.
Right. And then so, so the intent of this presentation was to be as general as possible. If you have specific questions, happy to jump at them. So in Blue Lakes, what happened is in 2004, I was not involved in the organization at the time, but they organized 3 districts. And then in 2018, they organized 3 more districts with the anticipation of essentially using 1 district for every phase of the development. But throughout time, in the bonding market, the way things are working, there's a significant amount of funds being pushed into municipal bonds right now. They're a safe investment, and so for a number of reasons, the bond market is enticing, and there's ways to finance public infrastructure through districts at a much lower interest rate than previously. So the intent for Blue Lakes now is to use 1 district, one of the remaining districts out there, to lay over all the remaining development of the property, and then issue bonds soon to finance the purchase of water and finance some public infrastructure for the development as a whole. But typically, the reason there are multiple districts and many districts beyond just 1 or 2 is to either address various uses within a district or a development, if there's commercial, industrial, residential, or different types of residential, or if there's a lot of phases of a development. And as you can tell, this one started in 2004. They have 2 built out chunks that are in districts 2 and 3 already. And so that's the reason for multiple. So you can issue debt as you develop the property, and then have the owners of that smaller part of the subdivision or part of the development pay its own way, instead of having a one development that cannot fund, or one district that would not be able to fund the public infrastructure for the entire development.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Board members? And I'm not seeing any.
It was riveting, I know.
I've had the fun of learning about these for way too long, and you know, the one thing that I like passing on to most new board members is how, you know, a piece of land is set aside and then those districts are all stacked on there, and as they move from phase to phase, they move that district to that next phase. Is that not a good analogy?
when there's multiple districts, that does happen often. I can tell you what we've done in Blue Lake is all of the property that's remaining to be developed is already in district number 1. So it's been sitting there for a few years. And I think when districts 4, 5, and 6 were originally organized, like I said, I think the intent was to exclude property out and then put them into districts 4, 5, and 6 as they developed. But because there's the ability to get bonding capacity to pay for a water purchase, which is needed to develop this property, and a good significant amount of public improvements for the entirety of the remaining development, in order to not have more districts than necessary over this property, our intent is to use one of the remaining 3. So there'll be the remaining 4. So they'll end up being likely just 3 districts over the property in this entire Blue Lake development.
Okay. Once again, looking for hands. Anybody? Can I, Mr. Stamey, go ahead.
Yes, for Mr. Rulon, can you send your PowerPoint to our town clerk?
More than happy to. I only didn't send it sooner because, in all honesty, I tend to tinker, and so I kept tinkering until 6:30. But it is finished now. I will send it to you.
Okay. All right. And if you could, Mr. Rulon, take your share down.
I can figure out how to do that. Stop sharing. There we go. And once again,
Right, thank you.
Thank you, guys. You'll probably be seeing us again sometime in the future with the Blue Lakes Service Plan Amendment to address some issues that I brought up tonight and make sure that we're able to develop the property and pay for the public infrastructure in the most efficient way possible. But if you have questions, Blue Lake, Silver Peaks, or just districts in general, like I said, feel free to send me an email or give me a call sometime. So
All right.
I won't keep you any longer though. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Rulon. All right. Now we're going to move on to the next item. Mr. Stamey. Mr. Stamey.
Thank you, Mayor and Board. So as the board, so about 2 weeks ago, I sent notice of my planned retirement date at the end of June, but I wanted to give adequate notice to the board to allow for the hiring process and transition before that effective date. We'd be looking at starting the advertising probably at the end of this week, taking applications and maybe scheduling interviews or probably around the week of April 12. But I'm looking at one option that the board might want to consider is maybe if the candidate list is narrowed down to like a final 4 list of maybe interviewing those 4, you could either do it individually but you could also do them all on one day, say on a Saturday. So that's kind of the board can think about those options if you want to do it during the week or try and have everybody in at different times on one day on a weekend. But I would like to point out to the board that even, with retirement, and as I have discussed with the previous board primarily, so I'm still interested in continuing work for the town in some capacity at a half-time basis. And under the PIRA rules, which I think some in the educational field are familiar with those, there's an ability, and PIRA allows for continued work with the same organization. So I'd be, I think there are enough development projects that are on the board that I could provide some oversight and good input to staff and that transition to help keep those projects going. And they're projects that I would enjoy working on as well. So that's kind of my one of my proposals to the board for follow-up is for your consideration.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Stamey? No, not seeing any. Trustee Jeffrey.
I would point out too that we did include when the previous board was doing our budget for 2021, we did include funding for that kind of overlap and part-time work.
All right, Trustee Jeffrey.
That is exactly what I was going to say, Steve, but I also just want to say thank you on behalf of the board for all of your very hard work these years. For Lochbuie, we continue to learn from you. I do, at least, every meeting, and looking forward to our strongest months being these last ones that you're here guiding us. And I do hope this board will find a way to keep you around in some capacity.
I was thinking maybe a doorstop. Anyone else have anything for Mr. Samey? No? Okay, again, we're putting it out there. What date? We're taking resumes or looking? What's the date?
We'll take resumes through the month of March.
Okay, so that's already out there. We're doing that now. Go ahead,
We'll have
Mr.
the
Ann.
ad placed. Jamie will place the ad here probably at toward the end of this week. We've got a couple of tweaks to the ad yet, but then I think maybe at the meeting on April 6th, we would maybe have an executive session to look at kind of the final list for interview selection.
Okay, sounds good. Mr. Ann?
Mr. Stamey, where are you advertising? Where'd you end up deciding to advertise for the position?
We would start with Colorado Municipal League as well as the Colorado City County Managers Association.
Okay.
And we were going to put a notice at the bus stop, just.
Yeah, I mean, we could place on ICMA if we wanted to go more nationwide for a search.
I mean, I think when we hired you, we did the CML and the Managers Association.
Correct.
But anyway, anyone have anything else on that? No? All right. Anything else, Steve, on that?
That's all that I had to share tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Then we'll move on to the special events discussion. Who wants to run with that? You're muted, Steve.
So this may be a combination of Linda and me comments and other staff, but we've reached out to two private individuals that do special events work. And one of the questions we've had for follow-up was kind of what kind of time frame, in terms of what month of the year, and are we looking to have an event? I think the fall in September, mid-September has been a pretty good time to have that event in the past. And then also, I think we need to consider what scope that event should be. Is it something similar to what we did last fall, or was more of a community recognition type of event, where there are, half dozen food trucks and a band and some gathering? I think our ability to do firework may be more limited this year because the site where it's traditionally been put on is under development right now.
Yeah.
And so I think we need to look at some kind of I think the community recognition type event last year was pretty successful for the town.
Yeah, we spoke about it earlier, and I'm of the mind that we still don't know where this is all going as far as everybody's really leery about COVID and all the fun stuff. But I still think that we should. I would really like to plan. I'd rather plan and not have it than plan or not plan and be able to have one. So I think, still I'm looking at I think the fall festival kind of thing, the September is a great idea to start planning. Mr. Ott?
I agree with the fall festival, but also we had some events with Brighton, which I think went over pretty good. The water park deal in Brighton. I think we need to find out if they're going to open up again or if they're going to keep that stuff closed, because I think some of those were good for the town too.
Well, and the last time I spoke with Jeffrey, the guy who runs the recreation, he was saying they're not sure if they're going to open up the water park yet or not. So that's still up in the air. I know. Anyone else have any comments?
Linda, did you have comments?
No, not really. I mean, again, I think it's the same thing Steve said and Mayor Mahoney said, just trying to figure out a time frame, maybe to plan it, or at least have some idea so we can get these people who potentially would be event planners for us if the financial cost for that is feasible. But of course, they will have other events, so they're looking for the time frame potentially, and so it wouldn't interfere if they're doing other events as well, and then they can kind of give us a better estimate of what that cost would be for our event, and then more, as Steve had mentioned, like what extent of how big of an event versus small, how many hours, I mean, all day kind of thing, just for us to have a better cost estimate.
And yeah, that's the thing too, is we need if we're going to have an event planner do it, we're definitely going to have to give them a date, or at least a range that they have the ability to plan that. And I don't know how anyone feels about it, but I was looking at the weekend of the 18th in September would be a good time to set that up. That was usually the Fall Festival time, was usually the third weekend in September. I think that's a good time. We've always traditionally had good luck and good weather, or decent weather. So anyone have any other input on that? I think that's
that seems like a really reasonable time frame, Mayor. And certainly I saw that the governor came out today saying that he thought, we're ahead of schedule in vaccinating, and maybe by this summer we'll have even reduced mask wearing. So I think to look at something in the fall makes a lot of sense. I mean, there's a much better probability you're going to be able to pull it off, which would be great.
Yeah. Now we can we can call it the Fall Recovery Fair.
Yeah.
or how about everybody come wearing a mask, but a different kind, like a Halloween mask. No, I think I'm thinking the weekend of the 18th would be a good, or just the 18th. I think one of the other things that has to come down on that is the event planner is going to want to know, as Ms. Blackson said, and I believe Mr. Stamey said as well, we've got to figure out what we want for the event, as far as, what can we afford? What is the, what does the budget allow them to do for us? So I think if we give them the date, we can work something out with them. And if no one has any issue with it, once we do figure out, and I think Linda and Steve are in talks with those organizations, you guys figure out, which one is which. I would be glad to discuss with them about, furthering it out and what's going to come of it, or what we'd like to see of it, and bring those things back to the board. So, kind of do that liaison thing, and because figure it out, what our budget can handle, and bring it to the board, and give all the options. So, anyone have anything else? Man, is everybody asleep tonight? Okay. Everybody's head just shook just about. That's funny. Okay. All right. Well then, Steve, we're going to end this conversation. And if you have anything else on that,
no, I think that will help us give a more specific discussion with the two parties that we're talking to right now.
Yeah.
And we'll focus on that date and some different options for scale.
Yeah. Okay. All right. With that, there were a lot of head shaking, Steve. So let's go into the town administrator report.
Okay.
and read every other word. Okay.
Okay, I will. I wanted just a couple of updates. As you know, we started preparing of a wastewater utility master plan, and so we're going to have that group come do an initial presentation to the board at the March 16th meeting. And we'll also be looking at growth in the town of Lochbuie, as well as a portion of the city of Brighton that flows into our wastewater treatment plant. So I think it'll be an interesting presentation for the board, and give you some idea in the direction of what that scope of the wastewater utility plan is. We do have Lochbuie Center, which is a new residential development just west of 7-Eleven. They have contacted us about starting their phase 2 infrastructure installation. So we'll be preparing and working with them for their site development permit to start that work. We've been working with the Quick Trip group for their application submittal for their subdivision and site plan and zoning on that property. That's at County Road 2 and County Road 37 in Bonanza. And we restarted the discussion with FRICO on their annexation proposal. We have a follow-up of that. I believe it's next week. And I think that's the primary updates from my staff report.
Yeah.
So probably one other comment on transition a little bit is if the board's amenable, I would like to work with the town attorney to work on an updated employment agreement, assuming that there's going to be an option for the part-time employment starting after sometime in August.
Okay. Anyone have any issues with that? Not seeing any disagreement? No. Okay. Yeah, I think the board is amenable to that. All right. Anything else, Steve?
That's all I have tonight.
Okay. And Mayor and Trustee comments. Trustee Antonopoulos.
I don't have anything tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Trustee Jeffrey.
I also do not have anything tonight. Thank you.
Trustee Ott.
I'll try to make it quick. As we all know, the legislative session is back in operation. I've been getting the updates from the CML on bills that are pending, and I also attended the legislative conference via Zoom earlier last month. There's a bunch of bills that have been introduced, but so far they're all in discussion phase. There's some that might affect us, but they're all the ones that I thought I might have an issue with. So does CML. They're all in. It has to be amended, or they're not going to support it. The only thing to watch out for is the representative from Westminster is trying to push through a bunch of fees since they can't get around Tabor. They're trying to add fees to everything again to avoid that. So we're looking into adding fees to Tabor. So that's all I have. And I've been sending all the stuff to Trustee Westcott, so I hope she's gotten the videos I've sent her of the CML reports each week. Thank you.
All right, Trustee Kimmerly.
Just a quick thought I wanted to share with folks. Again, so many of my comments seem to be traffic related, but it was made known to me that after our little 1 or 2 inch snowfall last week, that some folks were taking their liberties with their ATVs of doing donuts in common areas and zipping back and forth through the different developments on 168th, and just concerned again for everybody's safety, knowing that I've witnessed some of these vehicles when the roads were good and there wasn't snow and ice, that they just zip out of nowhere, and knowing that it's next to impossible to identify or catch these folks. It's just more of be careful, and just take your time going places, because there's some folks that think they live in the country still.
All right. Thank you. And I'll piggyback off of that a little bit. I actually have seen that quite a bit myself, seeing the quads and things like that zipping up and down many of the streets. And the worst part is I've seen a bunch of kids doing it, and that's been the scary part. So anyway, Trustee White.
Nothing for me tonight. Thank you.
All right. And Mr. Kimberly, I just have to say, as soon as you started talking, I don't know why, I immediately went to, you sounded like you were going into deep thoughts from Jack Handy. All right. And the only thing I have to say is I spoke with Steve and Maureen and Linda about this earlier, but I don't know if any of you had gotten any emails or anything. I had gotten a couple of people complaining because there was black smoke just rolling out of Tagawa's a couple weekends ago for about 4 days, just oily black smoke. And we've got that cleared up. I went there and talked to the GM there, and they had fired up a new oil burning heater. So they didn't have it, quote unquote, dialed in. So there was black smoke rolling in on people's houses and going over them, and it smelled terrible. But so if anybody did get any, that's what happened, and they've got it cleared up, they've got it dialed in, and they've got it running efficiently. So anyway, with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I
So moved.
Any seconds?
Everybody.
Yeah. All right.
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And seeing none, we are adjourned at 8:07.
Good night, everybody.
Have a good
Thank you. Have a good night.
Guys, have a good one.